Alex, Dave, and I are going to talk about politics. We're going to talk about the politics of this historic and yet incredibly safe selection. And Dave, I want you to go first, because I think almost everybody knew for a very long time that Harris was going to be the choice. But how close was Biden actually in real life to going a different way, to choosing someone else?
I mean, I think the fact that Karen Bass, another California member of Congress, and Susan Rice, who was on nobody's list at the start of all this, got real momentum in July, meant that there were at least members of the vetting committee and members of top Biden advisors that were looking at alternatives, really kicking the tires and seeing, is there a better option there? We know some members of the Biden committee were uncomfortable with Harris, had questions about whether she would put her own political ambitions ahead of Biden's if he becomes president. But having said all that, in the end, I think if you look at it on paper, I think if you look at it on television screens when they had their appearance yesterday, she made the most sense for the most amount of reasons. Having been tested through a national political campaign herself, a Black woman, an Asian woman, she checks two historic boxes there. And someone who was elected to the largest state and was a prosecutor. So obviously well qualified to do it. But I think, people were asking me yesterday, why her over all these other women, women of color, frankly. And I think the fact that she ran for president and had to go through debates and had to go through dozens of cable television interviews, kind of been going through the fire matters. And that made her less of a risk than these other fresher faces who just hadn't been through the gauntlet.
So, Alex, can you please concede for even half a second that this doesn't actually matter? That outside of Sarah Palin, I mean, really, outside of Sarah Palin, when has the VEEP mattered?
Actually, we're in total agreement on that. And I know that will surprise you. But I was actually trying to think back the last time a vice presidential selection really made any difference in the eventual margin of victory. And frankly, I'm not even sure Sarah Palin did. She definitely mattered. She was obviously a force unto herself in 2008, but that was a race that, particularly after the financial collapse, Barack Obama was always going to win big. And in fact, he won it big over John McCain. So, the history of this, there is a usual pattern, right? That there is an intense amount of speculation about who is going to be selected as the vice president. There is about 72 hours of wall-to-wall coverage of that person after they're picked. And then we effectively start to forget that they exist, with the exception of their convention speech and, of course, the vice presidential debate. And I'm not sure. I'm pretty confident that this selection will be the same, right? I mean, this is still ultimately a race between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. And frankly, you could even go further than that and say this is really a race about Donald Trump, at least so far in a referendum on him. And the degree to that Joe Biden's running mate is really going to affect people's opinions. If we're talking about the sort of political upside or downside, as far as for Biden's sake, the way I look at this, Kamala Harris does not do much for the Bernie left, right? She is not a Bernie Sanders style liberal, progressive or democratic socialist. And I think you have seen that in some of the commentary. But to me, what this is a concession to the Democratic voters, this is a concession to, are those Democrats who did not think of Joe Biden as their first choice for the nomination through almost all of the Democratic primary until the very end, until South Carolina, where they almost literally just had no other choice between him and Bernie Sanders. And this is Joe Biden saying, look, I understand that many of you wanted someone who was a little more progressive, someone who was not an older white man, someone who was a woman of color, and here you go. And these are, to be clear, these are voters who always were going to vote for Joe Biden. No doubt about it. But again, if we're talking upside, what might happen now is that they're willing to donate to Biden's campaign. They're willing to volunteer for Biden's campaign, a campaign that doesn't necessarily have a lot of enthusiasm in support of it, as opposed to opposition to Donald Trump, might now capture some of that enthusiasm. And in fact, we saw the Biden campaign announce that it raised $26 million.
It's extraordinary.
Right.
It was the best hour of his campaign. Isn't that what Schneider reported out of Politico? My old friend Emily. I mean, it was the best 24 hours of his campaign.
Right. And I think you could say, and I'd be curious what Dave makes of this too, but The speeches that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris gave Wednesday, though very strange because, of course, of the pandemic circumstances, they couldn't even embrace, much less hold hands, in celebration. But the speeches were good. Joe Biden, sometimes he is not always guaranteed to deliver a very strong speech. Well, in a moment that a lot of people were watching, certainly in the political world, he gave a very strong speech. Kamala Harris gave a very strong speech. And I think more than anything else underscored what a lot of Democrats will see as her primary strength in this campaign, not just motivating some different parts of the Democratic coalition, but bringing that prosecutorial experience and background to make the case against to make the case against Donald Trump, a case that she described as open and shut, and maybe what was the biggest soundbite from yesterday's speeches.
So, Dave, I feel like I've read so many piping hot takes this week about Kamala Harris and, why Biden picked her and what she does for the Black vote. But I kind of feel like the pick of Kamala Harris had nothing to do with the Black vote. Biden had the Black vote all sewn up. And if we're going to go ahead and be super reductive about this, which clearly everybody is going to be super reductive about this week, is this not the choice that Biden should make in order to continue to have a chance with middle-class white men? Working class white men. Let me correct myself, with working class white men.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this goes back to is she going to really matter in a month? I had one Republican operative say that I'd be shocked if she matters beyond September 15th. Like, she's going to matter for the next 2 weeks during the conventions where she will make the speech and then be attacked probably in speeches. But then I had a Republican operative email me last night, said, this is great because this takes Ohio out of play because she's bad on energy and the energy crowd doesn't like her. I don't know the answer to whether she's going to attract white working class men yet, or frankly, jack up African-American turnout in Milwaukee and Detroit. I think we're not going to know until show me polling after Labor Day. I know you don't like polling, Kristin, but I want to see some evidence of this first, because I am a little skeptical that this is going to change the race dramatically either. I mean, Biden is sitting at about a +8 national lead right now. He's about +4 to 5 in the battleground states that matter. Does that fundamentally change 3 weeks from now? That will be my metric to whether she really matters. The only difference is, like, this is historic, right? We've never had a woman of color on a ticket. So, we as political junkies have lived with Kamala for like 2 years now, but there's going to be a lot of people. I mean, I think there's a Morning Consult poll. 20% of people could not identify her, didn't know anything about her. So there's going to be a portion of the country, millions of people, that will be seeing her for the first time. And that's going to look different for a lot of people. Just a Black woman on stage, or on a live stream now, I should say, is going to be a different thing. And, like, we shouldn't underestimate that either. We shouldn't underplay that either. So 3 weeks, that's when I think we'll have a better handle on your question.
And to be clear, I don't think Kamala Harris's pick was as much about the African American community. I would say it's really about younger to middle age women, particularly I think professional women. During the campaign, the voters that she really attracted and was popular with really had a lot of overlap with Elizabeth Warren, for instance. Yeah. And I think that is really where, again, these are women who would never vote for Donald Trump and would vote. They're not going to stay home either. They're going to vote for Joe Biden. But now are they more enthusiastic? And in a hyper-polarized era, that sort of enthusiasm matters, right? It's not just that you kind of hold your nose and vote for the person. It's that you're excited, that you're, even on your own platforms like Facebook are promoting the candidacy, that you're showing that you're excited. That helps draw other people in.
So really now, I'm going to begin the countdown to the first misogynistic story about what a difficult woman she is to deal with, how demanding she is and how aggressive she is and how angry she is. So I'm putting down my marker. The timer starts now. And let's see which news organization goes for that storyline first. But Alex, I want to hear your conversation with Gil Duran. Yeah,
well, I mean, Gil, as the listeners are going to find out, he's a veteran of California politics, and I think understands, Kamala Harris in a way that, if you're just tuning in, you're simply not, understands her history. And I encourage everyone to listen to that interview for a real substantive discussion of who she is as a politician.
Okay, so that's our break. Let's go into the final section. I'm going to go to Dave first. All right, cool. Let's go to my favorite part of the show where you guys tell me something I don't know and hopefully tell our listeners something they don't know as well. And you are up first, Dave.
All right. So now with the Veep stakes gone, unfortunately, I love the Veep stakes. We can't have Veep stakes anymore.
Dave, what are we going to write about?
I know. It was my fun beat for a month, and now it's gone. So store ideas come my way. But I did a little research this morning on convention bumps, right? The next time we have a podcast, we'll have the Democratic convention will have been through. Between the years 1964 and 1996, the average convention bump was 6.5 points. This is according to the University of Wisconsin's Political Center. That dropped from the year 2000 to 2016 to just 2 points. So the thing that you don't know is that while there's going to be a lot of hype about convention bumps, they have been declining since 1964. And given that there's not even real conventions this year, I would doubt that there's even going to be more than a 2% bump this year in 2020.